When intimacy is discussed through an educational lens, the most useful place to begin is anatomy, comfort, and physiology, because these factors determine whether an experience is pleasurable or uncomfortable long before technique ever matters. From a urological and medical standpoint, the human body responds to touch based on blood flow, nerve sensitivity, muscle tension, and a sense of physical safety. Ignoring these realities often leads to frustration, pain, or misunderstanding about what pleasure actually requires. Female anatomy is frequently oversimplified, yet it is central to understanding comfort and enjoyment. The clitoris, for example, is not just an external structure but a complex network of internal tissue that surrounds the vaginal canal. This means pleasure is often indirect, influenced by pressure, angle, and movement rather than force or depth. Positions or movements that align with natural pelvic anatomy tend to feel better because they stimulate sensitive nerve pathways without overwhelming them. When anatomy is respected, the body responds naturally rather than defensively. Comfort plays an equally critical role. If the hips, lower back, neck, or knees are strained, the nervous system shifts into a protective mode. Muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, and arousal becomes difficult to sustain. From a physiological perspective, tension reduces blood flow to genital tissue, which can lead to dryness, discomfort, or pain. Comfort allows muscles, especially the pelvic floor, to relax. A relaxed pelvic floor improves circulation and sensitivity, making pleasurable sensations more accessible and consistent. Physiology also explains why emotional comfort cannot be separated from physical comfort. The brain is the primary sexual organ. If a person feels rushed, judged, or unsafe, stress hormones such as cortisol rise. These hormones directly interfere with arousal by constricting blood vessels and dulling nerve responsiveness. In contrast, feelings of trust and calm increase oxytocin and dopamine, chemicals that enhance pleasure and bonding. This is why environments and positions that feel secure and supportive are often preferred over those that are physically demanding or unfamiliar. Another important physiological factor is pacing. The female arousal response typically develops more gradually than the male response. This is not a flaw or delay, it is a biological pattern. Slow buildup allows time for increased blood flow, natural lubrication, and heightened nerve sensitivity. When this process is respected, the experience is more comfortable and pleasurable. When it is rushed, discomfort becomes more likely, regardless of technique. Breathing and posture also influence physiology. Deep, relaxed breathing increases oxygen delivery and encourages muscle relaxation, while supported posture reduces strain on joints and the spine. Small adjustments that prioritize comfort, such as proper support under the hips or maintaining neutral spinal alignment, can significantly change how the body responds. These are not performance tricks, they are basic principles of human physiology. Ultimately, focusing on anatomy, comfort, and physiology reframes intimacy as a shared biological experience rather than a performance. Pleasure is not something to force or manufacture. It emerges naturally when the body feels supported, understood, and relaxed. When education replaces assumptions, intimacy becomes more predictable, healthier, and more satisfying for everyone involved. Understanding why certain positions tend to increase female pleasure requires looking beyond surface-level behavior and examining how the body and brain respond to stimulation. From a medical and neurological perspective, pleasure is not accidental. It is the result of specific interactions between nerves, muscles, blood vessels, and the central nervous system. Positions that consistently feel better tend to align with how these systems are designed to function. Neurologically, pleasure begins in the brain, not the genitals. Sensory information from touch travels through peripheral nerves to the spinal cord and then to pleasure processing centers in the brain. If stimulation is too intense, poorly angled, or physically uncomfortable, the brain may interpret it as neutral or even threatening rather than pleasurable. Positions that allow predictable, rhythmic movement tend to be more enjoyable because the nervous system can anticipate sensation, reducing stress and increasing pleasure signaling. Medically, blood flow plays a major role. Sexual arousal depends on increased circulation to genital tissue. When the body is strained or muscles are tense, blood is redirected towards stabilizing posture rather than supporting arousal. Positions that support the body and reduce muscular effort allow blood vessels in the pelvic region to dilate more effectively. This increased blood flow heightens sensitivity and makes pleasurable sensations easier to sustain. Anatomy also influences neurological response. The vaginal canal is not a straight tube, and its nerve density is uneven. Much of female pleasure comes from stimulation of surrounding structures, including the internal portions of the clitoris and the pelvic floor muscles. Positions that naturally align the pelvis often enhance indirect clitoral stimulation without excessive pressure. This alignment helps activate nerve pathways that the brain recognizes as pleasurable rather than overwhelming. Another key neurological factor is control. When a woman can adjust depth, angle, or rhythm, her brain remains engaged in the experience rather than distracted by discomfort or anticipation of pain. This sense of control reduces activation of the brain's threat response system, particularly the amygdala, and allows pleasure centers to dominate. Medically, reduced stress response correlates with improved arousal and easier orgasmic response. Pelvic floor muscle behavior also matters. These muscles support the pelvic organs and are deeply involved in sexual sensation. Positions that allow these muscles to remain relaxed and responsive rather than clenched increase sensitivity. Chronic or situational tension in the pelvic floor can dull sensation or cause discomfort. When muscles are relaxed, nerve signaling becomes clearer and more pleasurable. Posture and spinal alignment further affect neurological signaling. Excessive spinal strain can irritate nerves or create discomfort that competes with pleasurable input. Supported, neutral positions reduce this interference, allowing the brain to focus on positive sensation. Even subtle discomfort can reduce pleasure because the nervous system prioritizes pain signals over pleasurable ones. In essence, positions that increase female pleasure do so because they work with the body's design rather than against it. They promote healthy blood flow, reduce muscular tension, align anatomy, and create neurological conditions where the brain feels safe and receptive. Pleasure is not about intensity alone. It is about harmony between body and brain. When that harmony exists, pleasure becomes more reliable, comfortable, and deeply satisfying. A truly educational understanding of intimacy places communication, safety, and individual variation far above performance or comparison. From a medical and psychological perspective, pleasure is not a standardized experience, and treating it as something to perform often undermines the very conditions the body needs to respond positively. Human sexuality is shaped by anatomy, past experiences, emotional state, and nervous system sensitivity, which means no single approach works the same way for everyone. Communication is the foundation of this process. Clear, respectful communication allows partners to share comfort levels, preferences, and boundaries without fear of judgment. Neurologically, when a person feels heard and understood, the brain reduces stress responses and increases receptivity to pleasure. Silence or assumption, on the other hand, can activate anxiety, even if no one is aware of it consciously. Anxiety interferes with arousal by increasing muscle tension and limiting blood flow. Simple communication creates physiological conditions that make pleasure more likely. Safety is equally essential and extends beyond physical protection. Physical safety includes avoiding positions or movements that cause pain, numbness, or strain. Pain is not a normal requirement for pleasure, and the body interprets pain signals as a reason to shut down arousal. Emotional safety is just as important. Feeling pressured compared to unrealistic standards or expected to perform triggers the nervous system's threat response. When that happens, the body prioritizes self-protection over enjoyment, regardless of intention. Individual variation is a medical reality, not a preference issue. Nerve distribution, hormone levels, pelvic floor tone, and sensory sensitivity vary widely between individuals and even within the same person over time. Factors such as stress, fatigue, menstrual cycle phase, childbirth history, or medical conditions can change how pleasure is experienced. Expecting consistency or trying to replicate someone else's experience ignores this biological variability and often leads to disappointment or self-blame. When performance becomes the focus, attention shifts away from bodily awareness and toward external validation. This disconnect reduces sensitivity to subtle pleasurable cues and increases self-monitoring, which is neurologically counterproductive. The brain cannot fully engage in pleasure while simultaneously evaluating performance. In contrast, when the emphasis is on shared communication and mutual comfort, attention remains in the present moment, where pleasure signals are strongest. Trust develops when partners acknowledge that preferences may change and that feedback is welcome. This flexibility reinforces emotional safety and reduces fear of doing something wrong. From a physiological standpoint, trust lowers baseline stress levels, allowing arousal mechanisms to function more efficiently. Over time, this creates a positive feedback loop where comfort enhances pleasure, and pleasure reinforces connection. Ultimately, prioritizing communication, safety, and individual variation reframes intimacy as a collaborative experience rather than a test to pass. Pleasure becomes something explored together, guided by the body's responses rather than expectations. This approach not only increases satisfaction, but also supports long-term sexual health by reducing pain, anxiety, and misunderstanding. When performance is removed from the equation, genuine connection and pleasure have the space to develop naturally. Using clear, calm, and educational language grounded in urology and sexual health science is essential when discussing intimacy, because the way information is presented directly affects how it is understood and applied. From a medical perspective, sexual health is a normal part of human biology, not a source of embarrassment or exaggeration. When language is neutral and factual, it reduces shame, lowers anxiety, and allows people to engage with information in a rational and healthy way. Urology approaches sexual function by examining how organs, nerves, hormones, and blood vessels work together. Explaining these processes without sensationalism helps people understand that pleasure and arousal are physiological responses, not mysterious or performance-based achievements. For example, describing how blood flow affects sensitivity or how nerve pathways transmit pleasurable sensations provides clarity without explicit detail. This scientific framing allows listeners to focus on understanding rather than reacting emotionally or defensively. Calm language also supports learning by keeping the nervous system regulated. When topics are presented dramatically or aggressively, the brain may interpret them as threatening or embarrassing, which limits comprehension. In contrast, a steady, respectful tone signals safety. This neurological sense of safety improves attention, memory retention, and openness to new information. Educational communication is most effective when the listener feels respected rather than provoked. Grounding explanations in sexual health science also help separate myths from evidence. Many misconceptions about intimacy arise from anecdotal information or unrealistic media portrayals. Medical explanations clarify what is typical, what varies, and what may require professional attention. For instance, understanding that arousal patterns differ between individuals or that comfort is a prerequisite for pleasure can prevent unnecessary worry or self-criticism. Science replaces speculation with clarity. Clear language avoids jargon while remaining accurate. Complex medical terms can be simplified without losing meaning, allowing broader understanding. When people understand how their bodies function, they are better equipped to make informed decisions and communicate effectively with partners or healthcare providers. This clarity empowers individuals rather than intimidating them. An educational tone also emphasizes health outcomes, such as preventing pain, injury, or long-term dysfunction. Urology recognizes that ignoring discomfort or forcing the body into stressful patterns can lead to issues like pelvic floor tension or reduced sensitivity. Calm explanations highlight the importance of listening to bodily signals and seeking help when something feels wrong. This approach normalizes care rather than stigmatizing it. Ultimately, clear and calm educational language creates a bridge between medical knowledge and everyday experience. It encourages curiosity instead of fear and understanding instead of pressure. By framing intimacy within the context of urology and sexual health science, the conversation becomes about well-being, safety, and informed awareness. This foundation supports healthier relationships with one's body and with others, making sexual health a subject of learning and care rather than confusion or anxiety.